everyone. This is Glenda Dawson, and I have LD with me today, and you're watching Glenda's Dragon's Den. So, tonight, before I introduce the phenomenal guest that we have, I just want to take a moment and please those that are going through this terrible heat wave in June and you're not used to it, like Pennsylvania is not used to it, please be careful, stay hydrated, check on your dogs, your animals, your neighbors. Don't forget that sometimes people don't say they need help, and they welcome the suggestion of the help.
And the same thing to the people dealing with the first named hurricane in Texas.
Oh yes, please. Let's send all our energy out there and stay safe, people. Don't be silly. Take precautions.
I'm silly enough for all of you, so.
Do whatever you need to do to get over it, get this done, and then just recover. So tonight we have Grant Cameron, who is, among many other things, a UFO Congress Researcher of the Year and a Leeds Conference International Researcher of the Year recipient. So welcome, Grant. How are you today?
Just fine. Thanks for having me on, and I appreciate your interest in what I do.
Of course. So for our audience, tell us a little bit more about you, and so they kind of get the essence that we know you.
Okay, I'm a Canadian. I live right in the middle of the country. I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, which is the one place in Canada where even people in Canada don't want to visit. I started my career 1975, so next May it'll be 50 years that I've been down the rabbit hole. And what happened was I was going to university and really couldn't figure out why I was at university or how do you make any money with the stuff I was learning at university. And a bunch of sightings started at a place called Carmen, Manitoba, which is maybe 35 miles from the U.S. border. And we used to drive around Winnipeg, the big city. It's about 700,000 people, drive around, do nothing. And I said to my friend, I said, instead of driving around Winnipeg, why don't we go and see what these people are looking at? I had no interest in UFOs. I never thought about UFOs or extraterrestrials or anything like that. He said, yeah, okay, we'll go. This is February of 1975. And we didn't go. It wasn't until May of 1975, the news reports were still saying this thing is still there. And then they captured it on film. And that's, they caught it. If you're familiar with the Nimitz story, where the UFO goes from 80,000 feet down to sea level in 7/8 of a second, this was caught on film. It was going the other way. They caught it jumping, TV crew caught it jumping from the ground to 5,000 feet in the air in 3 frames of film, which is 1/8 of a second. And it went viral. They were playing this thing frame at a frame, 1 frame at a time. There was 6 or 7 echoes as it flew across the sky. It was bobbing up. It was making a wave on a small wave on a big wave. It's just 8-minute video as they broke this thing down as what they had captured. And that's what I said to my friend. I said, come on, let's go see what they're looking at. It's like, wow, and the way I always describe it is it's like you buy the lottery ticket. There's a chance you can win, but you're not going to win. You're not going to win. You're not going to see nothing. You're going to go out there and everybody else can see it, but we're not going to see anything. So we go out there. We drove around this small town of about 2,000 people in the town, out of the town, in the town. Didn't see anything. We're looking around. What's people looking at? And it's whatever they're looking at isn't very, very amazing. And then my friend said, well, let's drive back into town one more time. If you don't see anything, let's go back to Winnipeg. I said, fantastic. It's been a total waste of time. We turned the car to go back into town for the last time, and it appeared from the left to the right. It was down low. It was right in front of the car. It was bobbing up and down. It was like it was alive. It was like a plasma type object. And nobody in the car said, is that what they're looking at? I wonder if that's what they're looking at. Everybody's like, there it is. It's like instantly knew. It was just so weird. And I couldn't believe it. It was like I had won the lottery, and I was raised very religious. I was supposed to be a minister when my mother wanted me to be a minister. So I was raised with a lot of religious background, and I had always assumed there are miracles in the Bibles, but there are no miracles. And that was the thing that popped into my head. There are actually miracles. Like, oh my, I couldn't believe it. I just felt so lucky. So then I dragged all my friends out 2 nights later, and I said, you got to see this. This is the most amazing thing you ever see in your life. And we were there, and there was people all over the place because everybody from the big city was there trying to see what was going on. And there was 27 people in the area where we were, just sitting in the middle of a road in the middle of nowhere. And we were sitting there, and my friend said, "Oh, we're going back to Winnipeg. We're hungry." And I said, "No, you got to see this. Stay. This is the most amazing thing." He said, "Nope, we're going back. We're going back for, I remember, we're going back for pizza." And so all my friends packed in their car, and off they went. And when it finally came the second night, there was only 7. There was 4 in our car and 4 in the other car. The other car was a courier car, that they used to courier around mail and stuff at the time. And I remember we had some kids who were doing science fair projects and stuff, young kids, 14 years old. And they were sitting in the field, and we were standing on the road, and you don't know what to look at. You were looking around like, where's this thing going to show up or whatever. All of a sudden there was a flash in the sky. It was like a flash cube, just went boom, like that. And the kid yelled out, he said, "Is that it?" And I go, "I guess so." I didn't know what it was. "I guess so." And then it was flash, 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 flash. And it's jumping around the sky. Flash, 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 flash. And I remember it was just like a football game. And it was like Larry talks about being at Madison Square Garden. It was like that. It was like, a goal just gets scored or something like that. And it's just like people screaming and swearing and yelling. And then I remember there was a girl in the car. There was 3 guys and a girl in the other car. And she couldn't see it. She was crying. "I can't see it. Someone show it to me. I can't see it." And people are just ignoring her. And the guy had what's called they don't have them anymore, but at the time they had like 35 millimeter cameras. They had these motor drives that would advance the film very fast. Mm-hmm. And I still remember he had the camera, and he had the camera on top of the car as this thing was coming towards us. And I could just hear this click, zzz, click, zzz, click, zzz, and it's just unloading the camera as this thing was coming at us, and it flew right at us. And then it sort of made this turn, and then it sort of flew back, sort of in not the same direction it came, but it sort of flew back. Years later, I wondered, I said, why did it come at me and then fly away? It was like it wanted me to know that you're not imagining this. This is the real deal. Right. And as it flew away, I remember I'm looking at it and I'm going, wow, that could be an extraterrestrial from another planet. I just felt so like, wow, I got so lucky here. Like how many people get to see this? And as it was flying away, and then I thought to myself, what's it doing? It's not doing anything. It's just flying along. And if all the things I've learned, that was maybe one of the most important lessons. So I have a theory I call the theory of wow. So I say, what's really going on? And basically, I conclude it's basically a phenomena, an intelligence that wants us to believe. It wants to shatter reality. It wants you to believe that the world is not the way you think it is. You think the world is, flat. The sun goes around the earth. All these things we got, this mistake, that mistake. There's time, there's space, all this kind of stuff. And what's happening is the paranormal things that they're doing are just to get our attention, and they're to get awe and curiosity. Because unless you have awe and curiosity, you have no research. Nobody's going to research. Nobody's going to study anything unless you're puzzled as to why is this? If you have all the answers, you're not going to do anything. And so then I described like this theory. Wow, like why do UFOs have lights on them? We don't have any lights on our plane. So why do they have lights? They have lights so you can see them. They want you to see them. It's like, hello. It's like the same thing this first night as it's flying away. And you can even show the thing with when Bud Hopkins got involved the same year. There was a lot of researchers got involved the same year as me. One was Bud Hopkins. He had a sighting over top of the car. And you'll hear this over and over again when you talk to somebody about their sighting. I always, when they have the sighting, I say, so what was it doing? And they go, it wasn't doing anything. It was just there. And it's like, do you think it saw you? Yeah, I think so. Do you think it wanted you to see it? Yeah, I think so. And that's the thing. Bud Hopkins, this thing is above the car. He's got these British people. He's driving these people along Cape Cod. And this thing appears right over top of the car during the day. This flying saucer just sitting there. And he's looking up at this thing. And of course, his whole world view falls apart. And then he goes the next day and he retraces the route. How long did he drive? How far was this thing? How long it was there and stuff like this. And he just goes down the rabbit hole. The same as in 1975, Linda Howe got involved. Linda Howe got involved because her brother was a helicopter pilot at Malmstrom Air Force Base, and he phoned her. He said, "Linda, there's these UFOs over the top of the missile silos in Malmstrom Air Force Base." And she said, "There are." And then that's how she got dragged into it. She found the cattle mutilations and started with the nuclear missile stuff. And Stephen Greer had his first CE5 event in 1975, and Travis Walton was abducted. And I always point this out to people to show that there's a pattern to this thing. People think it's a random thing. There's nothing random going on here at all. In late 1975, There was if you're familiar with the NORAD document that was recovered by the National Enquirer, they filed an FOI and they got this thing released. And it talked about UFOs over the SAC bases on the Canadian-U.S. border. And so one was at Loring Air Force Base. That's where they loaded the B-52s with the nuclear weapons. One was at Wurtsmith Air Force Base in northern Michigan on the border. One was in Minot Air Force Base, which is the missile base in North Dakota, where they have 150 nuclear missile sites. And then Malmstrom. So all these sites were being these UFOs were inside the weapon storage areas where they had the nuclear weapons. What people don't realize is that they were there from October the 30th, some of them started, and went to about November the 20th. When Travis Walton was taken, November the 5th through November the 10th, there was a UFO over a nuclear missile silo every single night that he was gone. That's not coincidence. So this is this thing where they're doing this thing. So they're doing this weird stuff, and it's almost like wherever they're from, whatever this intelligence is. The more I look at it, I tend to think it's a little more complex than ETs. But whatever this intelligence is, it's almost like a class. So the grade 1 class, they said, we've got these people. They're at this level of intelligence where they could destroy themselves, and they're starting to understand about consciousness and stuff like that. How are we going to get their attention? So the grade 1 class says, well, let's get some objects and put lights on them and fly them around. And then the grade 2 class says, well, let's take, mutilate cattle that are downwind and downstream from nuclear power activities. So they understand what this is about. And then the other class says, well, let's do crop circles. Let's put these crop circles down. And every one of the phenomena is the same thing. You're never going to figure it out. We think that there's an answer. The government's got the answer. There's one piece to the puzzle, because we're a Judeo-Christian society. We believe we're near the end of the world. Jesus is coming back again. We've got this all figured out, and we're at the very end. And they're basically saying, no, you have not got a clue what's going on. They're doing this, what I call shattering reality. And there was even in other fields. So I'm writing a book now. It's going to be a 2-part book called The Big Game. I was going to call it the Super Bowl, and then someone told me I get sued. But it's The Big Game, and I go through all the paranormal phenomena. And you see crossovers between different phenomena. And one of the crossovers is this whole idea of what's actually going on, that they're trying to create awe and curiosity. They're trying to get you curious, because what we do is we say we're here. We go into another country and we say we're here to bring you freedom, democracy, Jesus, and McDonald's. And then they turn guns and they say, get the hell out of our country. Who do you think you are? And we're doing the left brain thing. We're going to give you a lecture. They don't give you a lecture. They do this weird stuff that makes you go, what is going on here? So the 2 examples I can show you, and the one was, there was even a seance that was done. I was raised as a Lutheran. So Martin Luther was the big theologian, and there was a seance done many years ago with Martin Luther, and they asked him the same question when we ask about UFOs. Like, what are the UFOs doing here? Like, why don't they just land on the White House lawn and tell us what's going on? So the question that was asked to Martin Luther is, why doesn't God get off his big fat rear end and come down and tell us what's going on? Why is this secrecy with God? And he said, because doubt is part of the equation. If you don't have any doubt, your soul will develop wings and it'll fly away. This is the whole idea, is to keep the seed in the soil. This is how it works. And that's this process, is that they're trying to get us to figure it out. And the other one, if you've ever interviewed Mike Cleland is the guy who's the owl guy. Mm-hmm. So before he wrote his first book, he had an abduction experience in Utah. He was sleeping on the edge of a road. And he saw this. He wakes up and it looks like this UFO sitting on the hill. He said, "It looks like a UFO," and then he falls back asleep again. Next thing you know, he's out of his body and he's above the craft. And they bring him down into the craft, and he puts on this gray suit. He's in this gray suit. He looks at his hands, and he's a gray, and he's walking with these grays beside him. And they go, and he's in front of this panel. And he said the panel is all these different types of beings, but you can't see their face, which is a very common phenomena where the face is all sort of blurred out. Mm-hmm. And then he's going, well, what am I doing here? And then these sort of like a council say, it's time. He said, time for what? And they said, it's time for you. It's time. The time is now. And he said, well, what do you mean? And then they said, you volunteered for this. And then suddenly he realized, like, oh my God, I volunteered for this. This is my life. This whole thing with the UFOs and my experience as a kid and the abduction experiences and all sorts of stuff. And he goes, oh my, and then he started swearing at him and he said, you never told me it was going to be like this. You never told me it was going to be so lonely. You never told me it would be this hard and stuff like this. And they're saying, but you volunteer for this. And he said, I don't care if I volunteer for it. And he's fighting with these beings. And then they sort of calm him down. He said, it's like they put a pin in a balloon and he just went, and he calmed down. And he was being regressed by Yvonne Smith in Los Angeles. So he had said to her, when I'm under, can you ask me why I'm obsessed with owls? Why am I so obsessed with owls? So at that point, when these beings calmed him down, and he's just sort of sitting there, and you know how during a regression, people are just sort of whispering and they talking, and then she says to him, so Mike, what's with the owls? Why are you so obsessed with owls? And then he starts channeling. He goes, the owls don't mean anything. The owls aren't important. The owls are just a symbol. The owls are a symbol that are on the door. It's the door that's important. You go down this hallway and there's the owl symbol is on the door. And when you get there, you wonder what's behind the door. And you open the door and there's this vast unexplored universe. So what's happening is the owls, as the UFOs, is moving you from one door to the next. And there's a UFO on the door and you go, I just UFO. What's it doing on the door? And then you open the door. Oh, and then you go to the next door and they're moving you from door to door to door to door. And they're moving us down the path. And if you follow Gary Nolan, who is an experiencer from Stanford University, he talks about this download process that I've had part of, and he talks about the fact that you're sort of being guided by this kind of stuff, and that people are part of it, and people maybe not realize that a lot of the major people in the UFO field are all experiencers. You take Hal Puthoff's son had a major UFO sighting in Phoenix right after the Phoenix lights. Jacques Vallée is an experiencer. Eric Davis is an experiencer. Gary Nolan's an experiencer. Jim Semivan's an experiencer. They're all experiencers. And I remember Jim Semivan, people will sort of have these impressions about the UFO, and Jim Semivan had the beings in the room, and he was very upset. He's still upset 30 years later. And he said, they didn't ask my permission. They injured my wife, and he's all upset. And then I always like to say the other part of the story. That may be true. It's almost like you talk about at the beginning here about the weather and stuff like this. I wrote a book called Contact Modalities, and in part of the book says that how contact modalities take place. Like you get in the field, all the answers are in the field, and one of the major ways of getting in the field is trauma. It's going through the front windshield of a car. It's having a heart attack. It's dancing repeatedly. It's pain. It's suffering and stuff. And you dissociate and you suddenly leave and you're in the other field. Right. So this is the part of the thing that I sort of say about Jim Semivan's experience is, if Jimmy Semivan had not had these beings in his room, would he have gone? Because he's the guy that put the New York Times story out. He's the guy that went and to the top three-letter agencies and said, you guys can't get this out. We're going to drop this thing. We're not going to release classified material. We're going to drop this thing. He's the guy that met with Elizondo the first day. He's the guy that helped put the thing in the New York Times. And the question is, if you had not had the beings in your room in 1991 or whenever it happened, would you actually have done disclosure? No. That was the thing. People are doing this programming thing, and once you know what it's like, once you have an experience, you're down the rabbit hole and you can't get out. And it's the same as a near-death experience, where near-death experience people have a 75 to 80% divorce rate, because they suddenly just flip out. They just like, oh my God, they suddenly realize how the world works, and that their partner didn't have the experience and they don't know what's going on, and you've gone crazy. And UFO, it's very hard to keep relationships going in UFOs as well, because it's the same thing. If the other person doesn't have the experience, they think you're absolutely insane. You've just lost it. So that's basically my story. And I went through and I did UFOs. When it first happened, a lot of my stuff and a lot of my books, almost all my books, have a synchronicity that got them going. So I run on synchronicities, and the first synchronicity I had was that my father worked for the Department of Transport, and the big official flying saucer investigation that was done between 1950 and 54 in Canada was done by the Department of Transport. So my father worked for the same department. We're in a different part of the country. One of the guys in his office had a sighting. And so he said, well, Ernie Epp wants to talk to you. I said, okay. So I go and talk to this guy. And it was just a plane sighting, nothing unusual. And then he said, if you really want to know what's going on, you should just study what the Canadian government was doing in the 1950s. I said, oh, really? He said, yeah, I worked for the study. And I said, you did? It's like I'm trying to find this answers. And what happened? I had done a book on all the people in this town that had seen it. Like half the people in town had seen this thing. So I did it, and I thought, this is going to go great. And then the local publisher said, "Mr. Cameron, you may believe in this kind of stuff. Count me among the unbelievers." And I went, "What? What? I couldn't believe it. I was going to be, selling a million books and stuff, and nobody cared. Nobody cared." So I said, "Okay, enough of this citing." But when he said, "You got to study what the Canadian government was doing," and he worked for Wilbur Smith, and Wilbur Smith was talking to aliens, and they were landing in the backyard, and I'm going, "They were what?" So I went to this Wilbur Smith's wife, and I interviewed her, and she confirmed all this stuff. It's like, yeah, there was this alien by the name of Alpha, and they were going to land it at a Canadian Air Force at a base. And that the Canadian government, Wilbur had gone to the Canadian government in 1950 already and said he could build them a flying saucer. And the prime minister sat on the prime minister's desk for 3 months. And then they decided this is probably not the best time to do this. And I was just like, so I started on this whole process, because basically when I saw that thing flying the second night, I said, well, what are they doing? And I figured, like, I really don't know. I'm just some little guy, lives in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. I don't have any expertise. But somebody's got to know what's going on here. Somebody's got. So I started this process of going from person to person, and I went first to the Canadian government. And the Canadian government did write a memo in 1950 that said we were talking to American officials. We were told by American officials the following things: flying saucers exist. It's the most highly classified subject in the United States. There's a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush who are trying to figure out what's going on, and it's of tremendous significance to the Americans. And then the part of the download experience I got in 2012 was the next line in the document, which said, we're also told by American officials that other things might be associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena. This is 1950. They knew this already. The Americans knew, and they were telling the Canadians. So I went for him, and then I'm trying to figure out, well, where did he get this information about the most highly classified secret, flying saucers exist? And so we've tried tracing it back to the Canadian Embassy in Washington, D.C., and we came across Dr. Robert Sarbacher, and then he was asked, so how do you know? And he said, well, there was a briefing at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in 1950, and I didn't go, but there was a bunch of guys that went, and then Stanton Friedman saying, well, who went? Who was at this briefing? And he said, this guy, and he said, is anybody who was still alive? You're mentioning all these dead guys like von Neumann and von Braun and all these people, and say, they're all dead. Anybody? He said, well, there's this guy in Penn State, or in Pennsylvania. He thought he knew everything. He was a real arrogant guy. And then somebody discovered it was Dr. Eric Walker, who is the highest level source that anybody's ever had. He was he was on the board, and then he was the chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis, top military think tank for the U.S. government. That's where DARPA came from. All your black budget programs are run by DARPA. He was on the board that created DARPA. He's the guy that created Jason's. And we tried to talk to him, and he knew what was going on. And he would tell us things like, leave it alone. There's nothing you can do about it. Why should we change the rules and regulations to satisfy your curiosity? Go study something else. Unless you have the mind of Einstein, you're not going to figure this out. And then he said, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And then the guy said, I don't know. He said, look, unless you understand about ESP and how it works, you will not be taken in by the control group. There's an elite group of people that are running this thing. If you were in the group, I would know. And then a couple of years after him, Jan Harson, who ran MUFON, was talking to Ben Rich, who ran Lockheed Skunk Works, and he said, Ben, I had a sighting when I was 10 years old in my backyard. This flying saucer in my backyard. I've been obsessed my whole life. I've become an electrical engineer. I want to know, Ben, how does it work? How did it get here? How does the propulsion system work? Ben turns around. He said exactly what Walker said in 1950. He said, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And then Harson says, well, it means everything in time and space is connected. Said, that's how it works. Gets in the car and drives away. So that was the download I had in 2012. These three items came in my head. I was watching Colin Andrews give a lecture. I had no interest in crop circles. And it just, boom, these things came in my head. And I said, that's how it works. And from then no sightings. I couldn't care less about sightings. Well, I was never really concerned about sightings. But it was like, this is this mental thing, this consciousness thing. And in 2012, I couldn't have spelled consciousness, and I couldn't care less. And I will maintain that nobody in 2012 was talking about consciousness. They're talking about it now. Even people who don't really believe it, because they know it's a key word. You got to use this consciousness word. Right. In 2012, I didn't know, and that started down this whole new route of out-of-body experiences and all these connections to other paranormal phenomena and this idea of contact modalities. It's all the same thing, as the beings told Ray Hernandez. You got to quit parsing this stuff. It's all the same thing.
There you go. In a nutshell.
So I've done a lot of books. I do books. I've just released my third book on disclosure, which is a topic I just absolutely despise. I hate, but I keep getting dragged down this rabbit hole. And it's called Beyond Managing Magic. I wrote the first book when Area 51 was breaking. I followed that whole story with Bob Lazar, and I was dealing with Knapp, and we were doing the Walker story at the time of that whole thing. And that was called UFOs, Area 51, and Government Informants. Then I wrote the book called Managing Magic, and that was something that the CIA actually, I think, was very interested in it, because it symbolized this point. It wasn't managing UFOs, it was managing magic. And that's what Ron Pandolfi, I've been chasing Ron Pandolfi for 20 years. And he, he'll make comments on my Facebook and whatever. And we play this little game. I know who you are. And, he's a guy that knows. He ran the weird desk at the CIA. He knows as much as anybody about it. And he told, when he first started in 1991, he talked to a guy by the name of Dan Smith. And he said, Dan, we have a phenomenology problem. So this is the whole thing. It's phenomenology. They know this is not just UFOs. This is all the stuff. That's why they went to Skinwalker Ranch. They didn't go to Skinwalker Ranch for UFOs. If you read Jacques Vallée's diary, 1996, 1997, when Bob Bigelow bought the ranch, he said, "What are we doing here? There's nothing to do. There's no UFOs here." He said it. He put it twice in his journal. They weren't there for UFOs. They went there because they put 4 bulls in a trailer, a locked trailer, and they went. And defense intelligence said, "How the hell do you put a bull inside a trailer? Man, if we could do that, we could do all sorts of weird things." And the woman would come in and put her groceries away and leave all the bags on the kitchen counter and go back in a couple minutes later, and all the groceries are back in the bag. That's why they went to Skinwalker Ranch. They wanted to see how we can develop technology from this weird stuff that's going on in Skinwalker Ranch. How do you talk in somebody's head and stuff like that? And there's a port. I wrote a book called Weird, the manifestations in ports, and they were interested in ports because there was stuff disappearing. Somebody would have a postal logger and they would turn around, the postal logger would be gone, and they'd find it up on top of a tree and stuff like that. That's what they were trying to figure out. And they actually wrote, and when I put in the book Weird, I wrote this document from 1974 already, which shows that they understand the importance of what's going on here. 1974, there's a DIA document that says the importance of ports. He said, if we could develop ports, I'm just paraphrasing what they said, if we could develop the port phenomena, we could go to the enemy, go into the vault, get the documents, take them back to Washington, photocopy the documents, put them back in the vault, and they'd never even know we were there. So this is the whole thing. It's this military, and so we've got the whole thing comes down to disclosure stuff, comes down to this idea that Eisenhower warned, beware the military industrial congressional complex. And what we've done is we've built a world in the United States where you've got a $900 billion defense budget, and they ain't about to shut it down. There's no way. And we've written laws that allow them to do this. The whole UFO program is totally legal. Even this last round where it was blocked by Turner in the House, he blocked the bill, and the Schumer amendment went down the drain. If you take a look at the watered down bill, it says they don't have to turn over the material. They don't have to be subpoenaed. They don't have to release their top secret material. That is law. And the thing is to change the law. But I say, good luck to people that are going to change the law, because they know they're working on it, but they're not about to shut a $900 billion defense budget down and go get an honest job. There's no way. Everybody's making piles of money from this. And when Eisenhower made the warning, the warning was different because I studied the presidents, because I figured the president's got to know what's going on. So when I went to the Eisenhower Library, I looked at that speech, and I looked at all the people who commented on the speech, including Milton Eisenhower, who was the president's brother, and what they'd taken out a word. It was beware the military industrial congressional complex. And they had taken out the word congressional in the last speech that the president gave because they didn't want to offend Congress. And the whole concept is that once you get everybody with their hand in the cookie jar, you get Congress, you get the military, you get the people who got jobs in their district. As I point out, the F-35, Lockheed, who everybody believes has the UFO stuff, Lockheed builds the F-35 jet fighter. And I remind people it's built in 47 different states. The reason it's built in 47 different states is because if there's a massive cost overrun, or if the plane don't work, nobody's going to complain because everybody's in the loop. Everybody's making money. That's the problem you have. And I don't see how you're going to turn it around. That, in fact, Walker said, and I think he's actually justified, he said, why should we change the rules and regulations? And when he said that, I thought to myself, there's rules and regulations. I never thought until he said that there's rules and regulations, and he's just following the rules. He said, why should we change the rules and regulations to satisfy your curiosity? And basically what it is people are curious. They want to know about the government. And I always point out, the government knows. What difference does it make? So what? They know. I mean, get on and let's figure out what is the intelligence. Why is the intelligence here? And that's why I get so frustrated with the disclosure, because everybody figures there's one piece of the puzzle that the government has, and that you get that one piece, and they're flying saucers around. And I'm going, no, I don't think so. I think it's more. If you listen to Jim Semivan, who got the briefing, and I say, you got to explain what Jim Semivan said. Jim Semivan said, quote, there does not appear to be any there. What is he talking about? And he said, this seems to be on the edge of consciousness and quantum physics. And I don't think in my lifetime I'll ever figure out what is going on. This guy got briefed. And that indicates that you think they got to figure it out? They know there's a phenomena. It's called the core story. And the core story was Jacques Vallée, Hal Puthoff, and Kit Green from the CIA. They sat down at a Denny's restaurant in the 1980s, and they said, there's a lot of garbage going on in the UFO community. What do we know for sure? What do we know that's actually true? And they came up with what's called the core story. The core story is this. There is some sort of intelligence that's interacting with the planet Earth. We've got hardware and bodies, and we can't back engineer it. We're having a very hard time back engineering it. And Jim Semivan even pointed that out as well. So people say, well, there's crafts and bodies. Yes, but unless they've got a driver's certificate from Zeta Reticuli, because you got bodies and crafts doesn't mean you know where they're coming from. It doesn't mean they're coming from out there. It means you've got the hardware. And that was already in the core story. He said, we got hardware, but they put it on the shelf because they can't figure this thing out. So the government knows, and we'd be better spending our time talking to people who are interacting with the intelligence. So I say the people you got to talk to are people who are channeling. That there's a test. I always put my $1,000 bet. Anybody thinks they can fool me and pretend they're channeling. There's very certain things that real channelers, trance channelers do. And you get people who are in the field or people who are experiencers who are talking to the intelligence. That's what you got to do. Forget about UFOs exist. Who cares? The government knows. Who cares? We've got to find out the people who are talking, and nobody wants to talk to the experiencers. They cut them out. They just want to know, does the government know? Don't talk to me about experiencers. You'll see major people doing UFO documentaries. They will not put experiencers because they want to sound scientific. We just want hard evidence and stuff like this. But it's the experiencers, the people that are interacting with the intelligence. The intelligence is telling us what's going on. But it's like God is talking to everybody, but only certain people are listening.
Mm-hmm. Well, I channel the Council of Nine and a few other councils.
Yeah.
And it is very different when you're channeling them versus you're channeling, say, a spirit of someone who has passed away.
Yeah.
The energy vibrations are a little different, and the way they appear. Yes, the councils 99% of the time do not show their faces.
Yeah.
But they do eventually, depending on how close we are to the pivot point of either destruction or redemption, so to speak.
Yeah. And the Canadian government was told in 1950 they were dealing with this alien by the name of AFA that they were going to land at a Canadian Air Force base, at an army base. Mm-hmm. And he described this thing about the situation that unless there's the nuclear war, they can't step in. And he said, we could stop a nuclear exchange. If there's a major nuclear exchange, they could stop it. And they said to prove that we could stop it, we could take the world we could take the moon in front of the entire world, split it in half, put it back together in front of the whole world to show that we could do it. Other than a nuclear exchange, we're going to allow the human race to stew in its own juices. And I think that's an important part of the equation, is that we have to figure this thing out for ourselves. They're not coming down, because it's the idea that you've lived forever. You've had multiple lives. You come in here, you go through the river of forgetfulness for a reason. You're supposed to learn stuff. If you come in with all the answers and you got it all figured out, it's not really much of a lesson. This is the whole point, is we're to come in here to learn these lessons. And that's what the intelligence is doing. So it's dropping these little breadcrumbs. It's doing all these little weird things that are getting people curious, and they're figuring it out. And as people figure it out, and as you and I and other people talk and listen about it, the consciousness rises. And then as Max Planck, who invented quantum physics, had the same backlash. People in the UFO community always figure like Rodney Dangerfield. We don't get treated right. We don't get any respect and stuff. And basically, that's always been the equation. Max Planck, who developed quantum physics, talked about the backlash. He said, you do not defeat your opponent by convincing him he's wrong. Science advances one funeral at a time. The old people die out, and the new generation is not offended with the ideas. So you can have consciousness things that people really don't realize. You can talk about Area 51. We really don't know everything for sure. UFOs, we don't know for sure. Skinwalker Ranch, we don't know for sure. But you can go to the darkest corners of the world. You can go to the darkest areas of China, and you can say Area 51, and they go, "Yeah, I know what that is." You can say out of body experience. Yeah, I know what that is. And people may not believe what an out of body experience is. They may not believe in UFOs, but the consciousness is raised so everybody knows. Because I wrote an article in 2009 called "The 64 Reasons They Decided Not to Tell You the Truth." And I went through all the stuff that Stephen Greer brought up. I mean, oil is not going to be worth anything. The stock market's going to melt down. People are going to commit suicide, yada, yada, and went through all the 64 reasons and stuff like that. And then in 2017, when the New York Times published the article, and they said, yeah, it's actually true. The government's doing UFOs. And I couldn't believe after all these years that they had done it. And the question was, what actually happened? Nothing. Nobody jumped off a bridge. So the oil price didn't drop. Nothing happened. Everybody went, yeah, I knew that already. And that's the climatization thing. And all this is, okay, where are they from? And they go to the next step, and that's what they're doing. If they're doing this acclimatization thing, that the consciousness is rising, and your kids and your grandkids, they'll just go, yeah, we know this for sure. It's the old generation that are holding it back. And the only thing, according to Max Planck, is that's going to change is the old people are going to die off, and more people are going to believe it. And that's how it rises. That's what they want to do. So they can't, it's like this non-intervention idea. They can't come in here and do our homework for us. They're just to give us these sort of hints, and it may actually be us, because you'll have a lot of experiencers who'll talk about the fact that I'm related to them. I don't know. I'm sort of related to these people. I've met them before. I know them. And so we're part of the equation, which is one of the mistakes we make, because we believe in separation. We believe there's me and then there's you, and I'm the good guy, you're the bad guy. And in fact, when you look at all channeled material, when you look at the number one message that the aliens have, it's oneness. Everything is one thing, and you've got to stop separating it. Or as the channeler Paul Selleck describes, I like his line. He said, what you take from the divine and put into darkness through co-resonance, because you're going to resonate with whatever you're affecting, whatever you put into darkness, that same thing will take you into the darkness with it. What you damn damns you back. What you bless blesses you in return. For me to say I am divine and you are not is nothing more than the shadow pretending to be the light.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the messages are pretty simple, and I like to spend most of my time on this sort of idea of what's the nature of reality. How does reality actually work? And in my conclusion is pretty dramatic. I say that basically everything you see is going to be wrong. Everything. Because we started, the world is flat. Why? Because it looks flat. The sun goes around the earth. Why? Because it looks like it goes around the earth. Everything is solid. Why? Because it looks like it's solid. And we go wrong. And we go along, and now we're talking time and space may not exist. There's only one life. We're having living our lives at the same time. And I think that's the whole deal, is we allow our left brain to take what we see and feel and make a story out of it, rather than going to people who are in the right brain, the female brain, which is the one that's in contact. So the whole idea of getting in the field is one thing, whether you're using trauma, pain, suffering, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. The whole idea is to shut the left brain down, shut the ego down, make the ego surrender. When the ego surrenders, the noise stops, because the ego, the left brain, the male brain that wants to have the fights and the urinating contests and stuff, it's basically creating the noise. And once you can shut the left brain down through hypnosis, meditation, whatever you're using, you shut it down, suddenly there's no more noise, and you pick up the signal. It's the right brain, it's the female brain that's tapped in. So the female brain believes in the oneness. Let's have a family. Let's all work together. The male brain is, let's have a war. Let's have a hockey. Whoever, like a hockey game, or it's like whoever wins. The ends justifies the means. The idea is to win, and it's a competition and stuff. So we're moving more from the left brain, the male brain. We're moving into this right brain of this connection that you can go into the universe. 40% of all experiencers, according to the Free survey, where they talked to 4,200 experiencers, 40% of all experiencers say at one point during their experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe. Near-death experience, it's 31% say at one point during their experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe. I've got a new chapter in a book I'm bringing out where I go through all different contact modalities, shared near-death experiences, people in float tanks, and they all had this same thing where they had the answer to everything in the universe, and it was taken back from them, and they weren't allowed to bring it back. And I even had I worked on psychedelics. I even had that experience at one point where I got pretty close. I don't know if it was everything, but it was like, oh, that's how it works. I was like, oh, it's like it just somehow they can show you that, and then you forget it when you come back. And that's the whole idea of the river of forgetfulness, that they're not going to give you the answers. They give you little hints at it, and they make you work at it through awe and curiosity. It's awe and curiosity that move us ahead in this whole game. And that's what the phenomena is doing. It's just doing the theory of wow. It's not doing anything. It's just doing weird stuff that gets your attention. And then you're trying to figure out what's going on here. Like, oh, what is this stuff? And what are they doing and stuff like that? And they really don't care. And they don't care how long it takes. That eventually we're going to figure it out. And you can see from when I started in 1975, where everybody believed it was just extraterrestrial. It's very simple. It's nuts and bolts. They have a craft. I even now start to believe that all the propulsion systems may be different. Because if you there's an interview that was done with James Lukatsky, he was the guy that ran the OSAP program for the Defense Intelligence Agency. He did an interview which people got to watch. It was done with George Knapp and Corbell. Absolutely unbelievable what he revealed. He said, number one, he said, we had 200,000 sightings in the OSAP database. And he said it was like driving down the LA freeway and every single car was different. Every UFO sighting is different. It's like people believe there's the tree and all the leaves on the tree are the same. No, they're all different. Every single one's different. Every single person is different. Even identical twins, they have different fingerprints and stuff like that. And this idea of uniqueness. The other thing that he said was they've determined, and this is talking on behalf of the government because it was approved by the government. He said, we've determined that the technology is a combination of physical and psychic material. And when he said the thing about everything being different, I wrote a book called UFO Sky Pilots, where these people all just came to me. I didn't really find them. They all just came to me, people who claimed they'd flown the flying saucer. And I had 36 of these people. And then later on, I had Whitley Strieber added his story and other people adding the stories. And so when Lukatsky said all the sightings were different, I said, that's what's going on. And I went back and I looked at the data, and sure enough, everybody has the same story. The craft is conscious. It's alive. It's like artificial intelligence. It's alive. And what you do is you put your hand on the craft, you become one with the craft, and then whatever you think is what it does. And you can go from here to the other side of the galaxy instantaneously. The beings will actually say, imagine it in your mind. Glenda, as soon as you can imagine it in your mind, Glenda, we'll go there. Didn't push the button. And what happened was I looked at the 36 witnesses and everybody did something different. One person puts their hand on a panel. One person put their hand on a wall. One person put their hands in the end of a chair. One person had a ball. Everybody did. And I said, what's the chances the 36 people all touch something different? It's just like a dream. It's like everybody's having a dream, but all the dreams are different. And that's this whole thing about uniqueness. So I'm even now to the point where I think that, because I asked George Knapp, he didn't answer the question. I asked him, I said, George, you know, when Lazar was there and he had the 9 crafts that were inside of this mountain, were they all different, George? And then I said, and George, you did 115, the whole thing about the 115 element. Did you have anybody else who ever came forward? All the stories you've heard since 1989, have you ever heard anybody else tell the story about the 115 propelling a craft? And I don't think there was. I think that there may be that every single propulsion system is different. As I go through Grays, I'm doing this presentation on this cruise ship in September, and I'm going to show the Grays. People say the Grays, and I say, okay, let's look at the Grays. Take Betty Hill's gray, but Ridley Strieber's gray beside it, and you say, does that look the same? They're not even close. Then I put Betty Andreasen's gray. Then I put Ron Johnson's gray, and I put these gray. None of them are the same. And these are people who've actually drawn them. And we have this idea. Everything's the same. All the grays will look the same. But when you start looking at the drawings of the grays, you see that's all different. And so uniqueness is part of it. The universe is all unique. We're all individual sparks of the divine. And when it gets to my bottom line, I say it's all consciousness. There's no physical world. It's all made out of consciousness. It's all vibration. And that God did not create we have this religious view. God created the heaven and the earth, and then he put the soul inside and animated the thing. No, God created the sparks of the divine, and we created the universe. It's all being created by us. And if you've ever dealt with people who are in psychedelic experiences like ayahuasca experiences or DMT experiences, they'll say you can manifest instantaneously. Stuff comes out of your mouth, and you can manifest what you can't even stop it. It's manifesting. And that's where you get into the channelers. The first real big channeler of the 20th century was Jane Roberts. And the key thing that she said is held to be true ever since. Seth said, you manifest everything around you. There is no other rule. And when you start to understand that, you understand that the beings are just at this different vibratory level, and they're able to manifest stuff. They're able to change shapes. As my one experiencer friend, Yossi Ronan out of Israel, told me, they told him, when we come into your world, we can take on a body. We can take on whatever body we want. We don't have to, and you can do the same thing. You just don't know it. Or Sherry Wild, who was a famous experiencer out of Wisconsin, who wrote the book The Forgotten Promise, and now they're looking to do a movie. And she was dealing with Da, who was a Zeta, and she took it to the publisher. Her daughters were trying to stop her from publishing the book, and she didn't want to write the book. She said to Da, "I'm not writing your damn book, no." And he said, "No, the time is right. The time is right. Timing is everything. No, I'm not writing your book." And then she finally wrote the book, and she takes it to the publisher, and the publisher looks at it and he said, he's a Zeta?" She said, "Yeah, he's a Zeta. He's a gray guy." And he said, "Well," he said, "he's from Andromeda." "Yeah, that's what he says." And then the publisher said, "Well, if he's from Andromeda, he can't be gray. Grays are from Zeta Reticuli." And she said, "They are?" She didn't know. She just, "They are?" She says, "Well, the next time he comes, ask him." So Doc comes and she says, "So what's going on, Doc? Like, are you actually an alien?" And then he said, "No, that would not best describe who I actually am. I am an etheric being on a mission in the cosmos for the creator." And then she says, "So why do you come as this ugly looking gray thing?" And he said, "Ugly looking gray thing? You think I look ugly?" And she says, "Well, you scared the living daylights out of me. Every time you come, you block my memory, and then you come, and then I don't remember who you are, and you scared the living daylights out of me." And he said, "Sherry, you ever look in the mirror?" And then she says, "No, why?" He says, "You got those big teeth, Sherry. Every time you smile, we think you're going to eat us." And so I started asking all the experiences. I deal with a lot of experiences. I asked Nancy Train, who was the first experiencer before Betty and Barney Hill. I asked Nancy, ask him, ask Mr. Her guy is called Mr. Ask Mr. Are you an alien? No. And so you start asking, or people will say to the being, they'll say, "Are you actually an alien? Are you actually an extraterrestrial? Or no, where are you from? Where are you from?" And then the being will say, "You wouldn't understand." It's like, what's not to understand? You're from another planet. And that sort of indicates a hint that they're coming from somewhere, but I think it's going to be a lot more complex. And that's what they told me when I had I did a book on psychedelics. I did 27 high dose sessions, and in at least 5 of them, they were hammering me about this ego thing. And that's when they kept saying to me, "You think you understand? You really think you understand what's going on? You haven't got and they would swear, "You haven't even got a clue what's going on." And now I believe this. I actually believe this is true, that the more you go, the more weird it gets. And it's almost like anything else in nature, not just UFOs. You can take a look at an amoeba, a simple amoeba cell, and realize that it has 12 quadrillion atoms. That's 12 with 18 zeros after it, atoms in it. And it recreates itself. So all these atoms just sort of go together in the right spot. And we have 3 billion base pairs in the human body. An amoeba has up to 670 billion base pairs, and it recreates the base pairs with no errors. And then that thing can recreate, and that's the whole thing. When you look at something very, very simple, you realize it gets more complex and more complex. And the deeper you look, the more complex it gets. And you can never see reality. It's just like this. That's why I call this thing the Super Bowl. When you start to realize what's going on, you realize this is absolutely beyond anything you could ever imagine what's going on. I say the UFO phenomenon will be a lot less physical than people think it is. It'll be a lot more spiritual than people think it is. It will have, it'll be 1,000 times more complex than people think it is. And it won't have a hint of capitalism. Those are the 4 things that I've come to conclude in my 50 years of working with UFOs.
Okay. So, very interesting conclusion there.
So I want to share with you my favorite thought, which comes from a show that was written in the 50s called The King and I.
Okay.
The King does a song called It's a Puzzlement.
Okay.
And he says, "There are times I almost think I am not sure of what I absolutely know. Very often find confusion in conclusion I concluded long ago."
Yeah.
And it goes to the concept that perception is projection.
Yeah.
We can't separate from our ego long enough to process the reality. We shape it into what we expect it to be. Our minds do that.
Yeah.
Because they're so primitive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to try and sit there and think you are the apex of intelligence.
Yeah.
And the only intelligence in the universe, there's no way to get past that kind of arrogance.
Yeah. And that's all the ego thing. It knows more about everything than the generals. It's like and it gets in the way. And that's why when you do like remote viewing, the number one rule in remote viewing is don't guess. Just say what you feel, what you smell, what you taste, and stuff like that. As soon as you guess, that's the ego. And you don't give a target, you just give a number 4537093. You don't give the target, because if you say, oh, it's a target in Egypt, the left brain, the ego goes, I know what it is. The king's chamber in the pyramid, and it starts guessing. And it's like, as soon as they guess, it's analytical overlay. The experiment is over. They shut it down. And so that's the whole thing, is to get that ego that thinks it knows everything and it's in control. And you need the ego to sort of survive in the world. But the ego has sort of taken over, and it's dominating everything. And that's this idea of war and opposition, and my ego versus your ego, and I'm better than you, and I understand more than you, and stuff like that. And the ends justifies the means, and we're just sort of spiraling down. And they're trying to get this the female right brain to come in, and this consciousness to take place. And we're starting to understand it through UFOs, through other paranormal phenomena. We're starting to understand that this is possible, that we can actually get people into the field. And the idea is that everything's in the field, all the answers in the field. So why, if you had somebody who's able to channel and who's able to get in the field, why would you not go with that person? Because they can pick the answer out of the field. And I show stories of savants, people who they can't tell you what 2 times 3 is, and yet you ask them, like, what's the next 12 years that April will fall on, or that Easter will fall on April the 1st, and they'll go, and within 10 seconds they'll name 12 years when it'll fall on April the 1st, and that person can't add and subtract, can't button their shirt or whatever. They're pulling that out of the field. They're not figuring this out. So all the stuff is in the field. And what we're starting to learn is that, yeah, you can get in the field, and that's this trauma. So when I did contact modalities, I went through 70 some different modalities of people who are even are able to do it. Even things like Conan's, which I really didn't understand when I first heard it. But Koan is this Eastern idea. What's the sound of one hand clapping? And the ego goes, yeah, what is the sound of one hand clapping? I think I'll figure that out. And that's what you're doing in meditation. That's especially hypnosis. What you do is you say, count the breaths. And the ego goes, yeah, I'm the best breath counter in the world. I can do that. And then it sort of gets bored. It's like, I don't want to do this anymore. And then you keep saying, count the breaths, follow the breath, follow the breath. And you get the ego to say, you're saying, go for coffee. Okay, get out of the way here. We're going to do some work here. We don't need you in the way here. And then the ego shuts down, which is what happens in psychedelics. In psychedelics, the default mode network shuts down. That's the ego. And that's when people get terrified with the ego disillusion, where they think they're dying and stuff like that. And that's the ego shutting down. And once the ego shuts down, then you pop into the field and you're in this state of bliss. The ego is necessary, but the paranormal phenomena, studying this stuff, is teaching us these very core lessons about how does reality actually work.
Well, when Glenda channels the council, that's what they do. They give them coordinates.
Yeah. And
so they, get to go to those coordinates, and darned if they don't all wind up in the same place.
Yeah. That's the thing. And but the world, the way we work now is, the other reference I give is the ancient scripture of the Tao Te Ching. It says, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The Tao is the mother of is the beginning of heaven and earth. The Tao is the mother of all things. And what we've done is, the Tao is the spirit. It is God. It's that whole thing. And what we've done is we've taken the Tao and we've named it. So we say there's this, there's that, there's planets, there's people, and we've turned it into inanimate, unconscious nouns. And so we come to this idea, everything is dead, there's no God, there's just these nouns, and you get the nouns and they accidentally bang into each other and they create, and it's like, no, everything is alive. So the minute you name something, if you say this is this is that, no, that you're made a mistake. It's all alive. And that's what you get with the whole idea of consciousness, that it's all consciousness and it's all alive. Like your body loses, what is that, a million cells a second, something like that. They're dying and they're being recreated. So your body is different every second of your life. It's changing. It's like an organic thing that's growing and creating. And it's not but we want to make it as a noun. That's just a person. No, it's a living being, and everything is alive. Everything is conscious. And that when you learn to get in the field and you can actually manifest. And that's what the beings are able to do. They're able to manifest stuff instantaneously, go through walls and stuff like that. And they're just at a higher vibration, which people describe that they're at a higher vibration, and we're just as a low vibration. And people think there's these different levels. And I say, well, no, I don't think there's levels. I think it's basically, it's like this, the water. You're in the water. We're at the bottom of the water. We're in the dark. We're what's going on. We're sort of feeling around. We don't know what's feeling. And then the odd time, like Glenda, you suddenly channel and you sort of float up and you go, hey, there's fish around here. And then you go back into the darkness again and you say, yeah, there's fish there. And they go, no, there's no fish. And the closer you get to the surface, the more light there is and the more you can see. And then what we do is we make the mistake. We go up and we see these fish, and then we go to the fish and we say, hey, so what level am I on? And the fish goes, what do you mean, you idiot? You know, there's no levels. You're in the water. We're all in the water. And we're all in the consciousness. And we want to put these levels and nouns and stuff. We want to separate it and divide it all and stuff. And it's all the same thing. And that's what the Ray Hernandez was told by the beings when he was pulled out of his car in 2012, the same year I had my download experience. They said, they showed him all the different paranormal phenomena. It was spinning on this wheel. And they said, you got to quit parsing it. It's all the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, Grant, we have less than 4 minutes.
Yes.
And I want to talk about this cruise that you're going to be on. Glenda's going to put up the link for anybody that would care to sit down and have a chat with you, because what you said to us was you're actually going to be quite available throughout the cruise. It's not going to be, a one lecture and done. And you promised me that anyone that brings one of your books and wants you to personally sign them, you'll be able to do that, but they have to bring the book. So everybody has to do their own work, people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to do the theory on the theory of wow. I'm going to go through the whole lecture on the theory of wow, how it works. I'm going to be doing one on music. And that was another one that was a synchronistic thing. An experiencer told me. I got a message from the Guardians. Chris Bledsoe told me. He said, and I said, message from me? From the Guardians? Oh, cool. What do they got to say? And he said, they want you to know the messages in the music. And I said, well, Chris, you may be talking to the wrong guy. I don't listen to music. I don't play music. My whole family's in stuff. And he said, well, you should listen to Kashmir. And I go, yeah. And then he said, you listen to After the Gold Rush by Neil Young. And that's how they sucked me down the rabbit hole. I said, Neil Young? Neil Young is one? And then he said, yeah. I said, Neil Young grew up in Winnipeg. I mean, Winnipeg's not known for anything except Neil Young grew up here. And then it got me interested. I'm like, what's going on? And so I wrote a whole book on music. I have no musical background or whatever, on musicians that are experiencers. So I'm doing the music lecture, and then I'm going to do the lecture where I'm going to try to put the whole thing together. How does it work? How's the theory, what we're talking about tonight, the theory of reality? How does it actually work? How does the world work? What's really going on? Where are these beings? And how does it fit into all the other paranormal phenomena? And wrap it up. So it's people who go to conferences realize it's the same sort of thing, where you're around people all the time, and then it becomes your family. And these people are, because a lot of people, you tell your other half and they won't listen to you. They couldn't care less. But people come to these cruises because they can talk to people who understand what you're talking about. It's this association. So we're actually going to have contact group meetings in the morning where people can go, and people will cry and they'll tell their story. They've never told their story to anybody because they've been ridiculed and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And so it's an experience for people who've never been to a conference to see what it's like when there's a bunch of people who all are down the rabbit hole, and they've all had experiences, and they'll all trust you and they'll understand. It's a wonderful experience. So hopefully people can come. It's getting a little bit late to sign up, but it's a week with Danny Sheen will be there. Sims, Daryl Sims, Richard Doty is going to be on the cruise, and a bunch of women who do spiritual type stuff and consciousness type stuff. I think there's 27 speakers. So all these people, you'll be able to interact with them we have our own tables and stuff like that. So you can interact for an entire week ask all the questions you want. And people are quite open to trying to get the message out there.
Well, we want to thank you very much for gracing us and sharing your wisdom and the, just touching the surface of what you know. And Glenda, I'm going to let you take it out.
And I just want to say thank you, Grant, and thank you to our audience. Please share this so others may experience the same thing. And as always, take care. And remember, have a blessed day, have a blessed life, and we love you. Bye.
Stay with us, Grant.
Stay with